Outreach and Communications Director, and I'm your host for today's APPA Live. And I just want to thank you all for joining us. Today is Monday, February 12th. I see Colorado in the house. I'm from Sacramento, California in the United States. I know Seattle's here. I'm starting to recognize where you guys are all from. Fantastic. Well, if you're new here, APPA Live is our weekly webinar series where we bring you experts and pioneers in the field of pre and perinatal psychology to help inform and inspire our expanding awareness of conscious babies. This program is free and open to everyone who joins us live on Mondays at noon Eastern, but we have an incredible, huge library of all of our past APPA Lives, and our recordings are actually available as a membership benefit to our Premier members. And we're going to go ahead and drop a link into the chat for you guys to explore our memberships if you're not already a member, along with my contact info if you want to reach out and connect with me. I have to laugh. Elise, I just saw you're tuning in from Michigan with our little hand. We were talking about that before we came off online about how Michigan is shaped like a mitt. We're also preparing for our next session of the Pregnancy Dialogues Facilitator Training, which is happening February 21st. This is an incredible course that's taught and led by our board president, Dr. Raylene Phillips, along with Henrik Norholt. And I'm actually taking this session. I'm finally able to dive in, and I spent the weekend with the first couple of modules, and I just have to really encourage you all, if you haven't taken this course yet, please join me. I'm a birth worker outside of APPA. I'm a doula, and this course is just so foundational to what birth psychology is, what APPA is. I see some of our alumni from that course shaking their heads, and oh my gosh, you guys, like I feel like I'm just learning so much. Even though I've done this work for quite a while, it's just more and more that I can add on to support my clients. You're learning tools to help support pregnant moms or gestational parents in connecting with this pregnancy, practicing relaxation with breathing techniques, becoming aware of baby's movements and creating a dialogue with them, and just how to connect as a parent to your baby. And it looks like Stephanie dropped that link into the chat for me. So please join us if you have questions. Again, my email is up in the chat and you are more than welcome to contact me with questions. And finally, before we get started with today's APPA Live, I just want to encourage you all to join us for our Birth Psychology Month happening in March. We're building out all of our presentations. We're putting together collaborative experiences, incredible panels. We're going to have a beautiful opening ceremony. It's a free event, but we really encourage you to register just so that you're getting all of our emails, that you know when and where to tune into. And it looks like Stephanie put that in there for me too. Fantastic. So please bookmark those, open them on your browser, and then come right back to the screen. And let's shift into welcoming our guest presenter for today, Elise Bowerman. Elise, can you just wave to all of us? Hi. Elise is so incredible. I have really had the greatest pleasure getting to know her over the last couple of months. If you're not sure what we're talking about today, it's going to be just a fun, dynamic, collaborative conversation between Elise and I around the practicality of birth psychology. Elise really believes that the foundation of a peaceful world is laid at the very beginning of life, but acknowledges that there are challenges of promoting this ideal into a society that often overlooks the importance of maternal care. And as a new parent or a dedicated birth worker who's striving to change the prevailing narrative from detachment to deep connection, Elise provides insightful guidance. And I have to say that she and I have had incredible conversations around all of this. Her expertise is in integrating diverse methodologies, including perinatal yoga, doulaship, and womb health, which allows her to present a comprehensive approach to enhancing maternal care and making it accessible to a wide-ranging audience. And I'm just so excited as she's going to come on and simplify these really complex concepts and how she fosters community of care and connection in her community. And let's go ahead and welcome her. Hi, Elise. I would love if you wanted to share with our group, before we really get into the heart of it all, who you are, how you came into this work, a little bit about your personal life, and just share with us.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. And excuse me, my voice is a little bit raspy as I'm healing from just whatever's going around. So thank you for having me. And yeah, that intro was so lovely and warm. And it's really nice to see some faces on here. So if you have the opportunity to, show yourself, please do, because it's really nice way to connect in doing these Zoom live activities. So a little bit about my background is I've been a pre and postnatal yoga teacher for a decade and a half. And that's my main, excuse me, focus of attention for families. And in my line of work, I'm also a birth and postpartum doula. But again, most of my attention is on pre and postnatal yoga practices. And I have a holistic background. I grew up in a family that prioritized out-of-pocket healthcare. And so I understand that framework and can see the generational difference that value provides on families and the mindset shift of what we're conditioned to believe in the American model medical of care. I have two kids. I have a 14-year-old son named Lucas and a 12-year-old daughter named Lily. And I've been married to my husband for 15 years, and we've been together for almost 20. And yeah, and that's my general background and my work. And what brought me to APPA, because I think that that's really important to name, is I'm not totally sure. I can't remember when I got involved with APPA, when I started to learn and take courses and just read the material. I like to read the journal, and my mom was a researcher and self-learner, and that was deeply inherited in me to kind of like go on my own and be curious about the world. I have a very curious mind. I love to see how people live and do things, and because I think we can learn so much from each other. And one of the things that she planted in me very early, which I'm sure did bring me to APPA, was limbic imprinting. And I'm 42, and when I was in my late teens, she told me, when I have my own family, that if I want to change some generational dysfunction and to have like my own innate power and that liberation that birth can provide, I'm going to have to be very conscious about what I do. And because I was an emergency C-section, because she didn't feel empowered, or in her words, she felt very scared. And so she didn't want that for me. And she learned about limbic imprinting. She became a shaman in my 20s. And she just understood that deep level of the cellular memory, right? And that we're feelers first. She knew it before she even knew, APPA was around. And I'm just going to speak on her for a moment because I have to give her great gratitude. We have like I've done the healing from my maternal side without her presence for a long time, and now I'm able to do it with her presence. And I just want to name that that generational dysfunction is also a gift, and I am doing the work monetarily wise too, and creating community that my mom, I think, really wished she could have done, but she didn't have the capability or ability to do it, to create that life for herself. And so I just wanted to really recognize her and give honor to her and our relationship, because I wouldn't be here without her. I wouldn't be as curious. I wouldn't be called and drawn, and I wouldn't have been born on a Friday the 13th, the day of the feminine and the open portal to the connection to the universe. And the motherly seat that I have, not only in my family, but the matriarch and the wiser woman as I continue to experience life. So she gave me that gift of not doing what her provider said and have me on Thursday, the 12th. So thank you for listening and to sharing and for holding space for that.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, Elise. I have to say, I think that so much of our work here at APPA, right, we are always looking at those generational pieces, at what we've taken from our past generations and what we're bringing to our forthcoming generations. And I love that you're naming these things. And there's a couple of things that stuck out to me, and I would love for you to just, I think we'll get into this conversation more. And I have to say one more for just our folks who are kind of newly tuning in. This is going to be an ongoing conversation with Elise, and really picking her brain about how to practically use birth psychology and how she's utilized it so beautifully and well in her community. So please write your questions as we go into the chat. Normally we save our questions for the end, but please put them in as things are coming up, and we'll answer them along the way. But you hit on, right, this piece around your mom and how there was so much, I think, that she wanted in this community aspect. And I would really love for you to share, how you've created that with your work. And I know you shared, that you are a birth and postpartum doula, that you're a yoga instructor, but how you've really, really integrated that so well in your community and what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that completely lends the way to that path, right? So to give perspective, I'm in Michigan and I live in Metro Detroit. So I'm in the suburbs of Detroit. So it's city life, it's busy, it's going, and the community where I live in particular are very high achieving women and men, families, deeply insecure at their root and competitive in nature. And this is where I live. And so I just want to name that because where we're coming from and then how I'm presenting really matters, like of why I choose certain words in my language. And I would love, like, because I'm very my husband says I'm a little bit too realistic and practical, where I like make myself smaller than, you know what I mean? When I like kind of push things down because I want everybody to come in, and he's like, no, just name it, just say it. Right. So in my language and stuff, like in my marketing materials, with a business hat on, I try to bring in more so that I can reach more, is where I kind of come from. So I live in this deeply competitive, high achievers, PhDs everywhere and beyond, you know, heady people. And I found myself, as a, I kind of have to back up a little bit. So I got really into birth work when I got pregnant with my son in 2009. I was a new yoga teacher, but I was a dancer. My background, I have more background, right? I was a dancer and a dance teacher for a number of years, my whole life. And so I'm very movement oriented and very feeling and sensing. I have a deep visceral and kinesthetic awareness. And when I became a yoga teacher, I found myself pregnant. And at that time, if you were pregnant and a yoga teacher and you were up for teaching prenatal yoga, it's what you did. And I rode that train. I loved it. And when I birthed my son and then my daughter in 2012, I really opened myself up to dedicating my career and my purpose in life and focused on pregnancy and postpartum, because I saw and I lived in the time of not too many spaces dedicated only for pregnancy, dedicated only for postpartum. And that still exists very deeply in the yoga communities. We have a huge yoga community in our Metro Detroit area, yet it really lacks cultivating more of the community of centering birth givers in pregnancy and postpartum. And not to only have like, well, you can come if you're pregnant, you can come if you're postpartum, but really focused, dedicated time. And at that time, I just started teaching in a lobby at a yoga studio for prenatal yoga. I was like in the lobby, while another class that is more, higher revenue coming in was teaching in the higher class. And so my little class would come into the lobby. And then eventually my little class became bigger, and I advocated that, to the owner, I was like, listen, I got to go somewhere else, or put me in the big room. And so he put me in the big room, and over time, I only taught 2 classes a week, and my 2 classes brought in 40% of his monthly revenue. So I charged more, and I teach in sessions. So there's a 5 or 6 week commitment to the program, and that was a huge impact on his business and for me. As someone, I don't have a business background, but I've also always worked for entrepreneurs. My mom told me, she's like, you're going to be doing something. She's like, for some reason, you keep working for these guys that like are creating their own path. And so she's like, you're learning here to do something, and that's what it's embarked on. And I still only teach what I've ebbed and flowed in my years. And at most I ever taught was 5 classes at a time. And right now I'm back to 1 day a week for 2 classes. And for me, that's where success is, where I'm really reaching my community. So, customer service is something that is really important, and often in today's experiences is lacking. So this is where I feel providers can really stand out of providing exceptional customer service. And that starts with, greeting people when they come in with a warm heart and an open mind, probably a smile, and welcoming them just as they are. I also, I used to, maybe I need to do it again because it's coming back in my mind, but I used to give I used to handwrite cards for when I would have 20 people in one class. And so for like a session, like a 4 or 6 week session, I would handwrite a note saying, thank you for signing up. I might be your most visited birth worker. If you didn't know, prenatal yoga teachers are often the most visited birth worker in a pregnancy, because if they start seeing us sometime in their second trimester, and they can come to us until baby's earthside. And then we're often one of the first places they go back to once baby is earthside and they feel like they want to get out of the house again, in like a baby and me class or a specific postnatal practice. So naming that to them too, of like, this is more than just like yoga. Like, we're bonding and creating relationships. And any social workers on here, or psychologists, or ceremony holders, or those who've experienced ceremony, creating a circle is really valuable. Getting women together and birth givers together, where it's not only one-on-one, can be really valuable, whether that's once a month, once a quarter, if you're normally one-on-one with people. Considering doing a gathering once a quarter, once a month, for them to come together and the shared experience they had with you, because they support one another. I sit back and, I have a topic of a circle, maybe where are you planning to give birth? If and if not, then, like, we're creating ideas here, and then they'll share, and then it sparks conversation and support to one another. And then they become bonded and friends, because there's nothing more important than creating some kind of relationship, acquaintance, friendship, that they can text each other or call each other in those early phases, those early days of postpartum and years. right? Where they're like, oh, you want to go meet up for breakfast? Can I come
Mhm.
sit on your couch? You know, that kind of thing. Just in a prenatal yoga class develops. And then some of my students, they've been friends for years. Like they developed like really tight bonds that I didn't even know about until years later. They're like, we're actually really good friends. I'm like, you are? Like how
Beautiful.
like incredible.
That's absolutely amazing. That's exactly it, right? Is creating community. But also, you and I have talked, and I'd love for you to hit on this piece around how you're integrating birth psychology into your services, right? How are you educating your students or your friends and family? A lot of people don't even know what birth psychology is. They think it's, you have to be a doctor, you have a doctorate to really delve into birth psychology. And all of us on this call know that that's not true, that it is so practical. But how are you utilizing that in your space?
Yeah. Well, the gift of teaching an ancient practice is that birth psychology affirms everything. So that is a huge key. It's been very liberating for me as a pre and postnatal yoga teacher of having the heady intellectual information and people doing the research and proving, yes, like having dialogue, like the pregnancy dialogues. I'm like, maybe I need to get that on my list of accomplishments and
Yeah,
things that I need to open
yeah.
myself up to. But like creating that dialogue, we do in prenatal yoga classes, literally acknowledging baby's presence, right? Uh, and it's actually really fascinating. There, not all teachers are different, right? Just like all physicians are different. Every doula is different. So you got to like pick and choose, who you resonate with. And um, there are some prenatal yoga teachers who teach prenatal yoga and they're so focused on just, alignment and making sure that the body and the breath work is accurate and most efficient and effective and those things. And they completely lost like that there's a baby inside and we're here to build that connection and that's something that I really hold value to. I feel like I just kind of spiraled a different direction than answering the question. But yeah, so yes, so APPA affirms so much. And because my community is so heady and they need the information before they sign up, they're reading the reviews, they're, like, who's Elise? What's going on? What is this? And so I'm going to screen share real quick, so you can see what I've done. Oh, is it okay if I screen share?
Yeah, let me just go ahead and turn that on for you.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to screen share just to orient you. The screen's going to switch. And I'm turning my gaze because I have two screens. So, but you can see my website, right? Birth Humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So in birth training, I just name some things that prenatal yoga and this birth training helps with. And I call my prenatal yoga classes birth training because they get a module system that is like probably too full of information, but they can go through it at their own pace and see, pull out what resonates to them. So there's a lot of educational material in there. Uh, and then of course we're somewhat educating in a prenatal yoga class, but mostly it's an embodiment practice. But then when they click on like lower chance of preterm birth, wow, like she can say that, yes, because there is medical evidence that supports when you practice prenatal yoga, because some great researchers, the intelligent, minds, they did this research that supports this claim. And so linking intelligence with these somatic practices, with breath work, with meditative guidance helps the mind to like be like, oh, okay, like this is more than just a workout. This is more than just sitting around and saying kumbaya type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And um, Yeah. So that has been really helpful for me to name these things so that people know what I'm doing is medically supported. And I'm going to stop screen share. And we can do that also with like, the JAPA articles too, and the research findings. Uh, like, I still have a lot of work to do to lay more claims, and with the medical research that does come up and the long-term longitudinal studies that a lot of APPA intellects have done,
Mhm.
to lay all this out so people see like, wow, like, it's a subtle practice, but it's really powerful, especially over time.
Agreed. I want to just take a second. If there's any questions, folks remember to just put it in the chat around how Elise has been so successful just integrating APPA, integrating birth psychology into her practice itself. I think Elise, once in a conversation, you and I were chatting just around, um, it's not always mainstream to hear someone say, you have to take ownership or responsibility versus like, take this pill or take this drug or, do something like that. And so I think that if you could just touch on how you build so much trust within your community and, I think sometimes people don't always believe it until they see it, right? Or they're reading those reviews and just how you've built so much trust with your community.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. And that's a layered question, right? Like I feel like I can go in some different ways. And the first and foremost is embodiment. And one of my teachers, Usha Nandi, I just did a course with her. She was a student of Dr. Ray Castellino too. And the embodiment piece is huge. So, and I think that like everyone on here knows too. So, owning our own stuff, right? Like owning my own paths of birthing my own children, and that my story has nothing to do with anyone else's story. It's part of my purpose and for being here, on this planet and doing what I do. But having some time to work on yourself and self-reflect and embody and like own our story is so important, so that I, as a facilitator, don't project that onto somebody else. If I see someone where I feel like, thank you, Sheila. Yeah. uh, yeah, where I see someone like, ooh, like this looks familiar, and this is where I see some red flags. How do I go about presenting maybe options if they're open to options? And so that's where asking for consent comes in, of like, hey, like it sounds like you're really going through a lot of decisions right now. Cause I mean, in pregnancy, decisions galore, right? Like constantly. And what they're, I'm so sorry. I just looked in the chat. I gotta not look in the chat. Okay. Uh, just
I know
naming
that
that.
we have some good folks in there who ask some really good hard-hitting
Okay.
questions. So yeah, finish your topic
Okay.
and then
Sorry. Yeah.
yeah,
All right, I'm just going to close it out so that I'm sorry. I should have done that. I know
you're fine.
myself well enough. I should have known. Uh, So, so that's where it comes as a facilitator, right? Like we are here with, like almost like an emptying of ourselves to be fully present for other people and to let their stories be their stories. And I think that's where, for me, a little bit of blogging, I've been like I'm not consistent. There's no method to my madness of just writing down my thoughts or sharing what's important to me or what's on my mind that I need to get out. That's been really helpful for me as a facilitator. And I'm not a huge writer, but I have to get it out so that I'm not giving it to other people. And that has been really helpful. And then also with the business hat on, that also helps bring in more conversation and people clicking to come to your website. It gives more depth and breadth to your website. And within your own blogs and articles that you write about, you can, hyperlink to your services, right? Of, where those could be sprinkled in. So people are clicking on that. But anyway, so I share my story of my mom a little bit. And I share about my son having a medical event when he was an infant. I share some of these pieces so that there is that human quality presented just out there in the etherness of the universe, so people can see, like, okay, like, she's still human. She recognizes her own accountability. And yes, so Wendy, going back to the accountability and responsibility part, this is where it can get really tricky. And I have found laughter is really great medicine and can lighten the mood. And to share myself, because I'm not bound, I just want to name too, like, I'm not bound by any organization. I can have whatever kind of conversation with my clients as I wish. I don't have to have a veil of just discreetness, or,
Mhm. Yeah.
not showing my full self.
Yeah.
So that is liberating too. And I'm stepping more into that. I'm working with a group of women that are helping me and encourage me to step more into that, share more of my story and myself so that I can help more. And, but to share, like, to, not to say that I know what somebody else is going through, but I might share myself of, like, hey, I had a emergency medical event with my son when he was, 3.5 months old, and he had life-saving procedures. And we just happened to pick one of the two hospitals in Michigan that could do those life-saving procedures. And, I thought that for sure my story was going to be, I'm a mom who lost her child. And it was because of my own insecurity to go to the hospital sooner. And so I own that, and I have that self-responsibility and accountability, that I'm not here in the blame game. Like, I see my part, I see other people's parts too, but I see my part in what I did, and I will never let something like that happen again. But it was part of my learning lesson. And we all have a lot of learning. I have a lot of learning lessons in life.
Always.
And yes. And so I just, own that. And then once I kind of, like, if that was my example of something like unforeseeable moment that life I thought really was going to go, off the rocker. And how was I going to cope through that? I was already talking myself through, like, how was I going to cope through this? How was I going to move forward? What would my role be now? Like, whoa, all these things. And the greatest thing that I always, always, always circle back with, and I'm so grateful for APPA and all the research, is that it's never too late to repair. It's never too late to repair ourselves, to repair our connection with our children, for our children to repair their journeys, and to be curious about their journeys. And then, I was going to speak to one thing too. I just did, not just, but a few months ago, I did a podcast with the Unfiltered Moms. And I talked about how my children, I talk very openly, because what I've learned most from APPA and my household that I grew up in is, I'm not here for secrets. I'm not here for anything. Like, we are open, and our stories of how we were brought into this world matter, and they shape our nervous system. They shape the way we think about things and the way that we feel. And so I always talk to my kids about how they were born. And I talked to my son about his emergency medical event, what happened. And he's 14 now, and he still asks questions. My daughter asks questions about his, situation. And and it's just that natural, like, tell me more, mom. What have you left out? They'll literally say, like, what have you left out? I'm like, I don't think anything. Like, I think I feel like we're just having the same conversation with, I'm very happy to, but I'm like, I don't think there's anything else. And, and just how they were brought into this world, and, like, both of them were consciously conceived, and and just in that of, like, we, like, knew your dad and I, like, we were making you when we made you, like, you were here on purpose. And, you know, um, and just naming that stuff, especially when things start to go awry in the family, like, you know, like I have a teenager and preteen, like there's moments that we don't all like each other very well. But I think that that gives them like a greater sense of like, listen, like, you know, we want you here. Like, we want to be with you. We want you here. Like, we're in it with you. This is just a really, you're not going to like us right now because we're setting a boundary. But all of it stems back, we can track it all to like those early moments, days, pregnancy. Yeah, I mean, I was pregnant with my son, my first, and I found out my parents were getting divorced, and I was like, okay. So there was like that coming up too of like, I'm bringing a life into this world, and I just decided to create a life with my new husband. Like, how are we going to last if my parents aren't lasting? You know,
Mhm.
yeah, just naming and identifying things. That is the biggest thing, having uncomfortable conversations.
Well, I love that you're even having those conversations with your community, right? With your clients and everything. I really quickly saw Lauren pop into the chat. She says that she's a student of yours, and one of the best things that you're so good at is empowering and encouraging other people to seek curiosity, and that you were able to change her perspective from why didn't someone tell me this to I need to research X, Y, and Z. And I think that that's such a pivotal piece of what we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lauren. Oh, I so appreciate your testimony and your support. Yes. Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. There's another question that popped in from Vicky, and she says, what's your inroad with new moms or parents who come and they, think that they have all the support they need, or, they've figured everything out. And it makes me think, you said that you live in a community of really heady people, right? That they need a lot of research before they're even coming into a class. And how do you connect that with, being able to drop into that space of teaching a parent how to connect with their baby, right? There, sometimes those are two very, very different pieces.
Completely. Yeah. Uh, I, yes. Okay. Wait, where do I want to start here? Um, Hang on. First, I just want like the first part of the question was how do I support when parents think they know the answers or like the way, right? Um, well, I love them. Like, you go. So I'm not here to get in their way. And so something that I address right off the beginning is that these are practices and these are tools. This is a way to have some time to self-reflect in a time in society where there's really not time for self-reflection. So ultimately, our purpose here is to self-reflect and to get to know yourself in this big transformation that you're going to be the mother. You already are the mother to this baby, but when this baby arrives earthside. So just acknowledging that this is more of a self-reflection opportunity, and that you're going to learn and explore this by osmosis. You're going to absorb and take what you can and let go of what's too much or not applicable to you at this time, trusting that you'll pick it up if you want to pick it up later. It'll come back to you. And yes, does that kind of answer the question a little bit?
I think so. Absolutely.
Okay, let me know if I'm missing something, if there's more. And maybe I'll read a little bit too. Um, oh yeah, and then yes, so they think that they know. Here, let me just go back to. So yes. So what a group practice I have found really helps to ignite is that depending on where you live, and in a suburb area like where we live, we have lots of choices of even just where to birth, in a hospital with an OB, or in a hospital with a midwife, in a freestanding birth center, or a home birth midwife. We have lots of choices, literally easily all accessible to everyone outside of financial stuff that might inhibit, right? So hearing other stories helps to ignite like, oh, I might not even know that this is aware. And when we have our circles, this is where I name like, you might not be aware of what the difference is between a midwife and a doula and an OB. So I'm going to explain those three very basically so that you can understand when you hear someone say, I'm hiring a doula, I'm hiring a midwife, I'm with an OB, what that all means. And to know and trust that you can actually change who your provider is at any time, and you can give birth on vacation. Like, there will almost always be providers wherever you're at. And if you happen to be, so because I have had like some a number of years of working with moms is I've heard a lot of stories. And so one of the stories that I like to share too is one of my moms, she gave birth at one hospital and she really liked that experience. It was a hospital that has midwifery services too. She loved that. And then she got pregnant again, and her insurance at that time wouldn't go to the hospital that she wanted to go to. So she just happened to be at and by the hospital of her preferred choice, and she just took on the accountability and the responsibility, the ownership of dealing with whatever the financial thing will be. But just like, oh, I was just at this hospital. This was the closest one to me. I was over here, and and they're all within 20 minutes of each other. So it's just kind of funny around here. But it's like, I just happen to be over here. Like, so I guess I have to stay here, right? Yep, you do. Okay. And she made it work. So I think that liberation of just being like, you know what, I'll figure out the finances later. And money is a whole another topic of conversation of scarcity versus abundance mindset and all those things that sometimes come up in our prenatal yoga practices and our circle time of like, how are you able to like, invest in all of these things? Because they're all out of pocket, right? So it's naming and identifying ways of thinking a little bit differently about where a family might be investing in their finances. And like, I mean, I named my own experiences too. I paid $10,000 for a hospital birth that I was out within 24 hours with my baby and didn't even have a port in me. But we paid $10,000 out of, like $100 a month for like ever until we could pay it off. And it was just what we chose at that time. And you just deal with the repercussions later and move on because the feelings are what matters most. And I think when the moms, and I'm sure like providers here too, when the moms and the birth givers start to tap into their more feeling sense, their more self-reflection, self-awareness grows, they really start to see and feel, I can't think of any other words, they sense how important their feelings are and how they feel and they need to feel when they were working the hardest that they're ever going to work mentally or physically or both at the time of their baby's arrival. And so getting them to come into those senses themselves is a journey, and acknowledging that the time that it takes to connect from here to the heart space is a long journey. And then the head to the womb space, whew, that's a longer journey. So I totally embrace and open up that acknowledgement that this is a long pathway, and your story of connecting to this pregnancy is going to be a windy road, and let it be a windy road. Keep walking it until it starts to straighten out a little bit. And then it starts to straighten out and you start to get on your mission and how you want to birth, not what's available, right? Because we can all sit back and go, well, yeah, I really like that, but I'm okay with such and such. And when we get into the energy systems, that's a very probably unstable root chakra and sacral chakra of the energies where it's just all wishy-washy. It's like, well, it's okay. I don't really want to name that I really would like to do something different, but I'm okay with this. Like if it has to be. But it's like, well, what are you doing to stack your deck to have things go differently?
Ye-
And I think that's where I challenge my moms too, of, that healthy, loving challenge of like, you can't just sit back and let things happen to you. This is not the time for that.
I agree. Um, Elise, you've done such a good job of painting how important birth psychology is, and how valuable it is to humanity, how important it is to integrate that into your work. And I'm curious if you can share with us, how you've integrated it into the business piece of your work, right? How you've made your business grow and generate more income. Um, I know that you and I have talked about how creating the title even of your services, how that is so important. And so maybe you can touch on those pieces of the marketing of birth psychology, I guess you would say.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm also married to a marketing man. So I have to name that. I wouldn't have this nice website without him, but 100% of the words and the content are me. So I do want to name that. Uh, and so my business used to be called Sweet Mama Yoga. And I didn't want to be confined to just yoga because I knew what I was birthing and giving was more than yoga. Yoga is a solid foundation that I love and that will never leave me. But I wanted to name and identify other things that I'm still working on getting into this new phase of birth humanity. And for me, I'm being bold in my business name of birth humanity because this is the time for it. I can't sit back anymore and not name the importance that birth has on our society and on families. I think I named in here in the beginning. I think everything stems from the home, and the connection of parent to child is deeply important. And for that child to know themselves, to recognize like their story, right? And so I'm going to go back to my son too. Like his nervous system is a little bit like, you know, uh, still getting online, I feel sometimes like, uh, and he's a little rigid, and not totally comfortable in his body. I mean, granted, he's a 14-year-old boy, but there's still something there that, a mother knows and I've witnessed, his whole life. And I just name it and I just tell him, I'm like, I think your birth story. And I think that, the medical event that you had, like where you were poked and prodded and like, they were doing everything they could to save you, like really jarred your nervous system. And we're working on it and we're healing it. And, I just want you to know that there's nothing wrong with you. Like if, whatever. So, just identifying those things that like, it's just part of his story and who he is. And, um, we love him no matter what. He's perfectly fine no matter what. Uh, so sorry, I kind of went off. So in the business, being bold with my name, that really helps me personally as a provider, as a facilitator. And so I think that's where in like investing in your own time and self-reflection of thinking about why, like naming, why do I do this? Why is this important to me? And what is this? What is this that I'm providing? And I have a people pleasers mentality. I'm in recovery. But people pleaser in me wants to come out and I want to service everyone. And I want to like be like, oh, this is what you're asking for? Sure, I'll make a whole thing just for you. And I'm like, no, like I need to stay in my lane because I'm spreading myself too thin, right? So this is where staying within your scope, owning your scope. I have an amazing resource list. Like us birth workers, that's another thing in business. We like our Metro Detroit area. I'm going to say this here. Like we will be on the map for one of the best places to birth in our country one day. But we have an amazing birth worker group in Metro Detroit, and I'm talking about like four counties. Like we are all like in it. And we have great places to birth. And like if Metro Detroit doesn't get on the map for this, then we've really done a disservice in our community. And that's where I'm not afraid to be bold in my little community in Metro Detroit. I'm saying it all starts here and it starts now. I don't care if you go with me, but you got to find someone who understands that too. And I have these resources and these awesome providers that get it as much as we all can get it. And so working together and having true referral relationships, not where you're just giving people out and they're not just sending people to you, but true referrals, like nurturing that and being partners in it. Like I work with other prenatal yoga teachers. Like we're not against each other because we need more of us. And we're like, what are you doing? Like during COVID, we're like, what are you charging now? What are you doing? Like, how are you making this work? And we're supporting each other. And and we all teach differently. So it's like, yeah, if you want to go for more of like a really workout, more yoga class, like definitely go over to my friend Lori. She's amazing and awesome too. She's just different than me. And we complement each other that way.
I love hearing you say that. That's something so much that I find in my birth community here in Sacramento, excuse me, is just that, I'm one doula that I can't serve the hundreds of thousands of pregnant families that are here in Sacramento, but I can refer to so many other doulas and that we can create such a beautiful community. And I love hearing that so much. That's such a big piece, right? Even as you're getting back into these earlier conversations from our, from earlier, that creating community is so important, that's such an integral part of birth and postpartum, is having that community. Um, I love it. I saw a question in here. Um, oh, another testimonial. It says from Linda that you're a fabulous coach and so much more than just a yoga teacher. And thank you for what you're offering to pregnant moms, babies, families, and just that it's such a valuable work. And I think so much of our conversation is just, again, how to make the practicality of birth psychology in your business, right? We've hit so many pieces in your conversation today, is that you're open and honest about your life, your lineage, your roots, and all of that, and how focused you are on bringing in these different concepts and really meeting people where they are to make them feel comfortable. I know we have just a couple of more minutes, but maybe you can share what you do in a prenatal yoga class and what your focus is. I know you and I have talked about how you help support women who are maybe pregnant and feel in a state of freeze, or, they're not sure
Yeah.
how to support their body and their baby.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for naming that. Yes. So I'm willing to bet everyone here who's working with pregnant women and postpartum is they're not doing anything because they're so afraid to do anything. They're afraid to hurt themselves, their baby, all the things. And so that's something that I named too, of like, and recently, I'll be fast. Recently, one of my students, we were ending a 5-week group session and she's like, she used the term, this is her statement, is so if I'm doing these, movements and breathing exercises unsupervised, it will be okay. And I was like, this is like, this is this is what they're feeling and sensing, like unsupervised. I'm like, yes, like this is what it's for. It's for you to do at your home, like with everyone or with no one. You're not going to harm your child by moving your body. Like, what do you think is going to happen in birth? Right? Like, ideally, you're not strapped to a bed. You're moving, you're doing, and you need to know how to move and do before you actually get there. Right? So, just identifying that, like, does a marathon runner train for a marathon, or do they just go like, hey, I'm gonna go run a marathon today, right? So we have just those two, that like simple framework, they go, oh, and usually there's a light bulb. Okay, I do need to prepare for this. And then we start with the physical body, because to get inward, we have to start with physical body. So I literally have them touch themselves. Sometimes we'll do like just all around, like massage, like tapping all over the whole body. We might stand up or do it seated. I have my pelvis in the back. I'm really big about getting into the pelvic bowl. So I'll have them bring their right hand underneath their right sit bone, rock it back and forth, see how it feels differently from buttock to buttock, and then do the other side, and then have them feel the pelvic or the pubis symphysis bones, or oh my gosh, the pubis bones in the front and the tailbone in the back. That's all those 4 points: sit bones, pubis bones in the front, tailbone in the back. All that area is the pelvic floor. It's this massaging, this muscle that can ebb and flow and move. And so then I'll start to cue some guidance to draw their pelvic floor in and up, and then release it, and to see if they can start sensing and feeling the release along with the tension and drawing in and up. And of course, like as birth workers, focusing mostly on releasing in preparation for childbirth. But once we get the self-touch happening, we get the inside of the pelvic bowl moving, the muscles in the pelvis, and then maybe around, and not maybe, but eventually we get into the belly moving back and forth with the transverse abdominis of hugging and releasing. Just that stirs up energy within, and it's really subtle but profound, and it can show up sometimes as, feeling really unsteady and unstable, and it can also create confidence, liberation, just by stirring up the movement in the lower torso like that, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I think I had a question pop in earlier that I want to make sure I get to, and we'll go ahead and drop your contact info again for folks who maybe we didn't get to your conversation, or it warrants more of a deeper, answer from you. But Sheila was curious if you walk the inner labyrinth of your client's own birth with them, and how you weave that in.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I saw that, I saw your question too. I do not, and I actually don't really know what it is. So I would love to learn more about that. I wrote it down for myself to learn more. Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah.
Absolutely. I hope, Sheila, please write down Elise's contact info, because you do such great work around all that inner labyrinth and the labyrinth work. And so I'd love for you to share that and just keep growing the APPA community and sharing all of our wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, please connect with me. Yeah.
Well, Elise, thank you so much for joining and just talking about all of these practical ways to use birth psychology and how you've seen it change and grow in your community, and how you're able to reach families and create so much more of a society that feels like they're getting the right maternal care, that they're understanding these different foundations of birth psychology and how to really reach parents, because that's, who a lot of us are serving, are these parents and families. And thank you for bringing that to us today.
Thank you for having me. And I appreciate all the questions and the support here. Thank you.
Absolutely. I thank you so much, folks. Before we let you go, I just want to remind all of you, for next week, we'll have Magdalena Kiladaris. She'll be speaking on the well-being roots, nurturing health before and in the womb, and how the pivotal role that parents play in shaping their children's destinies. And it's just going to be such an empowering session. She's going to be discussing how early interventions and nurturing foundations really paved the way for a lifetime of nourishing health and happiness, and that reduces conflicts in all of us. You're welcome to come off of mute and say our thanks to Elise for being here and joining us.
Thank you, Elise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your wonderful enthusiasm about birth psychology. It's wonderful to hear you.